Welcome to the Healing Heart Podcast, where all healing is always a matter of the heart. I'm your host, Donna Campbell, also known as the Mind Whisperer, interviewing guest experts on all matters of healing. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Healing Heart Podcast. I am your host, Donna Campbell. Now, my guest today is truly amazing in her own right, because when we had our first set of conversations about what it's like to be on the podcast in the healing world, she shared with me some insight that I've never considered before as a speaker. So she has been in the broadcast industry for over 40 years. Now, she was a radio news director, a TV news reporter, a weather girl, back when they called them that. But she's also a talk show host and a producer for radio, a public television producer, an on-air personality, a college dean and instructor, and it just goes on and on, a voiceover artist. And now she coaches people with their voice, primarily for TV reporters and anchors, but works with everyone who speaks. So I am really super excited as a speaker to welcome Susan Murphy here to the Healing Heart Podcast. So thank you, Susan, for joining us.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. As soon as I came across your podcast, I literally, as I told you, said, I have to speak with Donna. We have to talk about healing and voice and heart and gut and brain. And I just thought this was going to be a great conversation.
Yes. I'm so excited, and I've been waiting to have you here for the podcast because I have so many questions. And I know you started off with news anchoring, all of that. So share us your path, how you got from there to working with clients with their voice.
Well, I like to say, I was reminded when you read through my brief biography that you can't shoot at a moving target. And that's always a good mantra when you're in the broadcast industry, because it's always changing. The needs are always different. Technology never stays the same. So I just sort of wended my way through radio and television and both sides of the microphone and the camera. And it was only about 2 years ago. I had lived in New York for about 27 years, and I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, to be closer to my daughter after my husband had passed away. So a couple of years ago, I was going through some TV channels of it around, local news, and I would stop every now and again, and I would see these young reporters who looked great. They could shoot beautiful video. Their writing was okay. Mm-hmm. They were doing a pretty good job, except their voice just didn't match their proficiency in putting together a story and, asking the questions or shooting the video. And I thought, that's a sin. I said to myself, when I was coming up, a lot of us started in radio, so you did get some vocal training. And as a voice actor, and then a college dean and assistant professor in TV performance, I very much highlighted the voice as being very important, obviously for radio, but especially for television. Everybody thinks it's about the picture, and it is not. So I thought, maybe I could start to help these young people who just don't have any voice training because they spend so much time in school learning the technology. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know. I looked to see if there were any other people who did what I did. And if I found one or two who sort of matched what I did, mm-hmm. Our backgrounds didn't exactly match. So I thought, well, I'm going to ask a news director friend of mine. He thought it was a great idea, thought there was definitely a market for this. He sent me 2 of his reporters. He didn't pay me. I worked with them. He wrote me a glowing recommendation. I sort of hung out my shingle on LinkedIn, mm-hmm. developed a website. I appear on podcasts. People come through my website. News directors are now working with me, sending me their staff members. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really think the company might go anywhere. Oh, but it's going somewhere. And I love, this is my life's work, helping young broadcasters really find an authentic voice so that they can better tell the stories that they're telling at their stations.
I love it. I absolutely love all of that. So for you, because I mean, this is the Healing Heart podcast, but we use our voices. And how do you help people find their voice, not just with like the news anchor, but with clients and all of that? What are some of the things that you do to help them find their voice so that they can receive healing?
Well, it's my belief that everybody has a natural and authentic voice that literally rises from the bottom of their diaphragm, that muscle that is attached to the lower part of your rib cage, where air gets into your diaphragm and then it pushes that air into your lungs. Babies are born knowing how to do this. When we sleep, we do breathe properly, but somewhere along the time that we learn to walk and follow directions from other people, what happened is we stopped breathing properly. We stopped breathing into our belly, and we do what's called conversational breath, which are shorter, more shallow breaths that do the job, but they're not efficient, and they often don't highlight the really beautiful tones that can come from your diaphragm. So the first thing I do with my clients is we spend the first hour on breath work that I was taught by a singing teacher when I was cast in a show and I had to do a duet with another woman. I had done regional theater for quite some time. Put me in the chorus, give me a couple of lines, great. But I got cast where I had to sing a duet and I nearly froze. I had 6 weeks. We called it triage singing lessons. And that's where I developed a lot of the practices for singing, but boy, do they translate beautifully to speaking. So I use what I've learned, in the 40 years, plus the singing lessons, plus the voice acting lessons I've taken. And it's all about the breath. It is completely about the breath. So that's the first thing we do. And then we move on to writing and we talk about how the tone of your voice, if I'm going to show you where your best vocal pitch is, tone comes in your speech and how you color the words you're speaking. But it's all about the breath. That is where we start. And for people to actually slow down and practice what is also too primarily yogic breathing, it's a different set of counts, the way I do it. Yes. For some of them, it's very difficult because they're just not used to slowing down like that. And you have to be able to connect to that breath so you can really find the authentic voice that rises from your diaphragm.
I love that. And, as you're talking about the breath and the breath work, I'm now really conscious of my breathing, which is something that I do often with the healing work that I do. You're always taking that big breath in and releasing it in through the nose, out through the mouth. And I do that often throughout the day. But I'm also guilty of that shallow breath. And a lot of times when I go into meditation and I'm breathing, my breathing sometimes just stops altogether. And then pretty soon and you come right back out of it. So what are some of the key tips that you have with people on breathing and how can they get that richness tone out of their voice?
Sure. I have a sort of long version and then I have a short version. The short version is really very simple when you put your mind to it. And it involves 2 things. And I learned the first thing from, again, the voice teacher, and I had no idea that your shoulders have more to do with the pitch of your voice than you have any idea. So my first tip is drop, relax, loosen your shoulders. Why? Because when your shoulders are relaxed, all the muscles into your neck and jaw and face relax as well. If you go to tighten the muscles in your shoulders, it actually involves, you can't just isolate that, at least I can't. And So if you actually try to tighten your shoulder muscles, everything tightens, everything around your chest, and then you go right back to shallow breathing because air is just not getting down into the bottom of your diaphragm. So the first thing is to drop your shoulders. And I'll always tell my reporters or my CEOs or my CFOs or my ministers or my nurses, check in with those shoulders when you're speaking and drop them. And then the next simple tip is speak from your belly. It also requires that when you breathe in, and as speakers, teachers especially, we're always breathing in through our mouths and out through our mouths, which is drying to our vocal cords, because when you breathe through your nose, your nasal structure moistens that air and helps to lubricate your vocal cords, but not true when you're breathing through your mouth. So when you breathe that air in, you're just be mindful, and that really is all it is, mindful of it getting all the way down into your belly. And you know you're doing it right when the waistband of your pants stretches, because your diaphragm is like a balloon. And when you fill it with air, it expands. And when you release the air, it contracts. So when your waistband and your belly expand as you breathe the air in, you know you're doing it right, provided you don't move your shoulders. If you were to say to any 6-year-old, could you take a deep breath for me? She'll go, and the air will go in and her shoulders will go up to her ears, because that's kind of taking a deep breath, but it's not the right way to take a deep breath. Lower the shoulders, breathe into the belly. And then my 1/3 piece of advice is to speak boldly. I did not say loudly. I said boldly, which is sort of your regular conversational voice with intention. And those 3 tips can go a long way in making sure, particularly for women, to help you get rid of a little bit of valley speak where you end every sentence up, or that girlish or breathy voice, or that very quiet voice. It really is a matter of breathing into the belly and relaxing those muscles and then speaking boldly. And that's where confidence rises from. People are sometimes surprised by the tone and pitch that come out. Well, it's been there all the time. You just didn't know it.
Wow. So for people who are listening to this, as Susan's been talking, I've been mentally in my mind practicing and relaxing my shoulders. So if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, my shoulders are going down. I'm paying attention to my, where my pants hit me with the belly, and is it going in and out, and all of those things. So as somebody practices these tips and these techniques, what can they expect with their voice?
What do I expect?
Yeah, what can they expect and how their voice changes?
Well, first of all, I'm going to teach you how to practice it, because it's not like you sit down for 15 minutes and practice anything sort of special. You don't even have to go that far. My little recipe for breathing in and out is breathe in on the count of 4 and exhale on the count of 6. The exhale on the count of 6 helps to train at least a broadcaster or a speaker's brain. Sometimes your brain thinks you're going to run out of air. And so then that ignites all kinds of things in your brain, and messages get sent to release adrenaline or to release cortisol. And that's the last thing you need, is that fight or flight hormone and chemical release. So when you breathe out on 6, it's telling your brain, I know how to breathe in and I know how to use the air until I have none left. So then your brain, with any luck, will stop sending that signal. And as we both know, that rhythmic breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is very calming. So how you practice it, in my teaching is you breathe in on 4 and out on 6. And my singing teacher said to me, Susan, if you're serious about this, and I was serious, I had 6 weeks, you're going to take 4 Post-it notes and you write breath on them. Personally, I don't think you need to write anything, but one goes on your steering wheel, refrigerator, bathroom mirror, and computer. And during the day, when you pass a Post-it note, you stop, you sit or stand, drop your shoulders. I also like to sort of drop your jaw so that there's no tension in your face. Breathe in on 4, out on 6, both times in through your mouth and out through your mouth for 1 minute. I'll do the math. That's 6 breaths. Do 6.
I love it.
And move on across, and then move on with the rest of your day till you pass another Post-it note. And my experience is if you do it religiously for 2 to 3 weeks, it kind of becomes second nature. And you will be able to, I call it the zone, and there is a little bit more to it than just lowering your shoulders and breathing into your belly. But you can get yourself into the zone, prepared to speak from the best possible position in getting up your most natural and authentic voice. You'll be able to do it like that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. We're here with Susan, and we are on the Healing Heart podcast, and we're talking about healing with your voice. Now we're going to take that quick sponsor break, and we'll be right back for our last set of engaging questions, because there's a few things that I want to know around healing with it. So stay tuned. Get what you always wanted. Abundant life is possible. Transform your lifestyle in just weeks with the most innovative system developed for heart-centered business professionals who seek change today. You are one step away from creating infinite prosperity, happiness, and love. Grab your bonus link now that's in the show notes. Okay, welcome back to the Healing Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Donna Campbell, and our guest today is Susan Murphy, and we were talking about how to heal with your voice. Now, Susan, I know you've given all of these amazing tips, how to practice, go about your day so it becomes second nature, but there was something profound that you discovered when working with the different people, your clients, in healing with their voice when they started doing this. So
I had no idea this was a thing. I'd be working with, and so far I've only found this to be true of women. I'd be working with them, and I have lots of little tricks and tips to really, if you're having trouble bringing up a beautiful, rich pitch in your voice, I have other things I can suggest and things you can picture. And there, I finally there were some women who just couldn't do it. And then it occurred to me what possibly the problem was. And I just kind of guessed this on my own because I was out of ideas. And I would start by saying, I'm wondering if maybe there's some sort of reason from your past that this beautiful voice hasn't been developed. And if it's okay, I might ask you some questions about your family. Like, did you have overbearing brothers and sisters? Or, so many of us grow up in dysfunctional families. Or maybe you had early on some teachers who were harsh. Or maybe you gave a speech in second grade and you got shot down by either your friends or a teacher. Or maybe there was an overbearing, authoritative figure in your life who didn't care what you said, or you felt pushed into a corner, or your opinion wasn't considered.
And all I think is like my mom.
There you go. And sometimes, more often than not, I would see tears come into these women's eyes. Or sometimes I wouldn't catch tears, but as I would ask these questions or suggest these possible things, they'd say, well, yeah, that resonates with me. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned is that these women don't use their voices because whatever they did as children or much younger women, teenagers, helped them get through something mm-hmm. in their lives, that little voice, that quiet person was just what was required at the time. Because had they raised their voices, or if they were not valued as young women, that you can't speak louder than the boys. And let me tell you, I'm working with 20-somethings that I find this still to be true is a little bit heartbreaking for me. And so I will say to these young women, well, let's take that little voice that's in your head, or that little voice that informs you how to speak, and we're going to move it aside in your brain. Can't kick it out. So we're going to thank it for getting you to this point. We're going to move it to the side of your brain, and you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to step into, I'm going to give myself permission to speak, which I think means live from a different place. And these young women will come back to me after they've practiced it on air, but many of them then use the practice throughout their daily lives. And they've come back and they've said, Susan, do you know how healing that was? And I've also learned that it can even be trauma that goes back generations. I just worked with a minister. Same thing. I just had this feeling that there's something here. An absolutely beautiful, well-educated, fabulous Black minister who, when I started to bring this up, tears in her eyes, and she realized that generations of women in her family were not seen or heard or told to speak, or whose opinions mattered. So I think by speaking from your natural, authentic place, finding it. And if you don't know where it is or you can't find it, get a voice coach.
Yes.
And you will find that you speak differently. You carry yourself differently. People look at you differently. People, their heads turn, their eyes will widen because that little girl or that breathy or that mousy is starting to lift. And they realize there's a much stronger person down there, and it comes from your voice.
Absolutely. Absolutely there. Real quick, with the people that you work with, what are some of their silver lining gifts that they receive when they find their voice? Who did they become? How did they transform?
That's a great question. They become who they've always been meant to be, and just didn't realize they had that. I guess it's a power that they're happier, they're less tense. Oh my goodness, I've worked, the women who have, I'll even say the word suffered with these smaller voices, have held on to so much. And when you can let that go, you're clearer, you're calmer, you almost grow, not physically, but you grow emotionally. Yeah. And then when I watch these young women, when they start to get, their news director says, wow, you sound so much better, or they get mail on their Facebook pages, or one woman said, she had always been afraid to, when she would drop her daughter off for soccer practice, she was always afraid to talk with the other parents because she knew her voice was kind of squeaky high, and we'd been working on it. That's the nurse I'm working with. And she would say, well, you know what? I now find myself getting in on conversations with these people. I'm not afraid of that anymore. I mean, what better gift could I unlock for them? I didn't give it to them. They had it.
Okay.
But the gift back to me is to see them literally grow.
I love it. And that is the best gift, when you see somebody shift, change, and transform, and they start living the life of who they meant to be. Because, I mean, really, that's why I believe we're here. Absolutely there. All right. So if people want to work on their voice and do different things, how do we get in touch with you?
Well, sure. My company is called Susan Murphy Vosot.com. VOSOT. Vosot is broadcast shorthand for voiceover sound on tape. So I sort of picked a very newsy TV lingo sort of thing. And I'm now that my practice has sort of expanded, it's like, what's Vosot? So, all right, let me tell you what Vosot is. So, but you can't forget it. And I'm on LinkedIn, and that's my website. And you can find me. But I think any sort of voice coaching, I mean, I would imagine sometimes even if you can explore it with a friend, if you even think that the voice you're using is being stymied by something that happened years ago or generations ago, talk it out. You must have found the same.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I find it through writing and speaking and all of those things.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. So everybody reach out to Susan, amazing gifted healer, using your voice. I am, because as a speaker, we're always looking at improving and sharing our gifts in so many different ways. And the gift of voice is such an amazing, really gift. I don't have a better word to offer with other people. So all of her information will be in the show notes, and just reach out. And as always with the Healing Heart Podcast, just go create that beautiful day.